Good morning. Everybody's caffeinated? Everybody's got their orange juice? Okay. What a beautiful day outside. Welcome to the 36th Annual Organic Farming Conference. I'm Claire Hintz. I am the president of Marbleseed's board of directors. I'm so thrilled that you've gathered here with us in La Crosse, whether it's for one day or the whole weekend. On behalf of the Marbleseed board, I first want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are living in an unprecedented and turbulent time, with people standing in different places. But our values as a community remain true. We are farmer-led, we are rooted in organic. The board would like you to know that we stand behind all our farmers and the people and the organizations who support them. So whether you're just fine, whether you've lost grant funding, whether you're not sure what's going to happen, we are here as a community together to support each other. We have multiple ways. If you would like to share your story, there is a story project recording your farm story in celebration, your challenges. It's down in the trade show right near the Marbleseed booth. Hatcher, you want to raise your hand? There we go. Find him and you guys can share stories, as well as in all of the sessions and open spaces that we have at this conference. We are a community, and we are going to move together through this time. I would like to introduce our board of directors. I'm not going to name each individual board member, but if the board could stand up, we have been working hard to make sure, and we're kind of all over the room, if we can make sure that, thank you. We've been working hard to make sure that we as an organization are thriving, and we have an easier job because we have a phenomenal staff and director. So the staff of Marbleseed, if you are in the room and not running around, if you would stand, we want to acknowledge all of your hard work. And of course, the staff don't just put on this conference. We have programming all year round and work that we do all year round. And so this conference is in addition to everything else that the staff do. Next, I'm going to read the Marbleseed Land Acknowledgement. Marbleseed, as an organization committed to the regeneration of the geography known as the Upper Midwestern United States, through organic farming practices, owes gratitude and acknowledgement to the indigenous communities who have long stewarded this land that we now all share. This statement is made within the context of a present where tribal communities are continuing to struggle for sovereignty in their ways of hunting, fishing, gathering, and farming. Marbleseed comes to the first citizens of Turtle Island, North America, offering respect and a deep appreciation for their knowledge of all the plants, animals, trees, soils, and medicine this region supports. We hold curiosity and desire to learn from tribal partners, to be accountable for our actions, and to be a true partner in healing the land so that all ecosystems, natural communities, and species may thrive. Wisconsin, the primary place of Marbleseed programming and operations, is home to 11 federally recognized tribal nations: Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Ho-Chunk Nation, Lucoutere Band of Chippewa, Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, Menominee Tribe of Wisconsin, Oneida Nation, Forest County Potawatomi, Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, St. Croix Chippewa, Sokogan, Chippewa, or Mole Lake, and Stockbridge, Muncie. Our hope is that the members of the Marbleseed community will join us in this journey to learn from, partner with, pay respect to, and uphold the knowledge of Indigenous peoples of this region. Thank you. I would like to welcome Lori Stern to the stage, our Executive Director of Marbleseed and Mistress of All Things, who will introduce our general session speaker and panel.
I think it'll be okay. Maybe. Hey, good morning, everyone. I have to say that this year, more than ever, I was so looking forward to being in this room with all of you. I have to also tell you, I got a call from my daughter, who's very much a supporter of this community of organic agriculture. She's worked on organic farms, and she kind of says to me, is the Marbleseed Conference going to be the place where the next movement is born? I kind of want to be there. And I think we have a history of that in this community, right? Farmers coming together to work for a national organic standard. The Organic Farmers Association came out of conversations that happened in La Crosse with all of you. So it could happen. It could happen. And there's definitely space in this year's agenda for those conversations to happen, for folks to connect and really talk about matters that matter to us most in this moment. You know, we end up doing a lot of our formal content in the fall, and in that space at last fall, we didn't know, would we have a farm bill? Who's going to be the next administration? What will Congress look like? And we work across the aisle. We are a nonpartisan organization, but there was uncertainty in that. And so I'm so excited that this year we have the Farmer Summits in a more central place in the agenda. That is the opportunity where we can really kind of dig in and talk about what matters most, share our knowledge with each other. And then, of course, over meals, the amazing hallway conversations that I have already had just in moving through the conference center yesterday. So thank you for everybody that's interacted with me. I welcome those conversations. It fills me up, so thank you. So this year's keynote, we're doing something a little bit different. I have wanted to have Rob Dunn come and speak to us as a community for a few years now, and we have not been able to make it happen. And finally this year when he said, well, I could Zoom in, I said, okay, let's try it. We're gonna try it. I'm a huge fan of his work, largely because he's extremely multidisciplinary. He started the Bread Lab, which if anyone in here has a sourdough starter, it was like starting to talk to folks about, you know, this is our baby, it's part of the family. It's like, how do we think about bread in all the ways, from our own sustenance to ritual, and just looking at all of that, in addition to the biology of the fermentation process. And so I got really geeked out on his work early on. He's also done an amazing TED Talk on citizen science, and I know that a lot of the folks in this room as farmers, we have programs that enable you to do that research on your farm and share with each other what you learn. And then, of course, he's a biologist and really leans into the complexity of ecosystems, which, again, as organic farmers, we definitely know what that means to manage complex ecosystems on our farms. So because Dr. Dunn is joining us virtually, we also have assembled an amazing panel who represent both farming and professional roles in agriculture. So after Rob speaks, he's going to hang in for the panel and potentially some questions from you all. And then the panel's going to kind of share their reflections on what they hear in what Rob shares with us today. So now kind of for the official introduction. Dr. Robert Dunn, or Rob, serves as the Senior Vice Provost for the University Interdisciplinary Programs at North Carolina State University. He's an avid writer and has published many popular articles in National Geographic, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, among many others, as well as 7 books, most recently A Natural History of the Future, which was reviewed in our Organic Broadcaster this winter, and Delicious, The Evolution of Flavor and How It Made Us Human with Monica Sanchez. So right now, without further ado, I will welcome Rob Dunn.
Thank you so much, Lori, and everybody. I can't be there. What I'd most like to do is just be there and listen to people and learn from you. And lieu of that, I'm going to do the opposite. And so forgive me, but hopefully we have years and other contexts in which we can learn from each other. Joey, okay?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, we are okay.
Okay. And so the question I want to start with, and I think uses a prompt for conversation this morning, but also more generally, is this question of how do we think about bigger time? 300, I trained as an evolutionary biologist and ecologist, and so for that part of my life, 350,000 years is not very long. Or how do we even just think about 1,000 years or 50 years, and what the world can look like in these different periods? And as I think about these things, I'm going to be thinking about them in light of our mutually beneficial relationships with other species, and I'll be thinking with a couple of other things. So one is my role over the Office of University Interdisciplinary Programs at NC State, through which we seek to bring the entire campus together around societal challenges with the publics of our state and more generally. And I'll also be drawing on the book Lori mentioned, and Naturalist Route to the Future, and then this book that's out in August, in which I'm really thinking about mutualisms. And when evolutionary biologists think about mutualisms, we think about a relationship between individuals of two or more species when both or all benefit. And in most species, the units that nature uses for this are those of Darwinian fitness, whether individuals of both species produce more offspring when interacting. It's an open, cultural, historical, future question what units we should use in relationships between humans and their species today. When you're thinking about your relationship between you and your community and what you grow, how do we measure if that's a mutualistic relationship now? We won't all agree on that, but I think it's a question that's important to be asking. I'm going to go through 5 of 6 sections of some ideas here. The 6th section will emerge in conversation. The first few of these, I'm going to ask you to trust me on the take-homes, and we can talk about them at future events. The first section is really recognizing that today we live in a world in which we imagine ourselves collectively, we tend to imagine ourselves and our futures as separate from those of other living beings. It's not the world you experience as growers, but it's the world that is so much part of how we talk about what's around us. And we've done lots of scholarship on this, and we see this divergence increasing, and we see the number of species that people can identify and know and appreciate decreasing. And so this first take-home in which I ask for your trust is that we're increasingly unaware of the rest of life and our relationship with the rest of life. And how do we think about that? The second is that in our increasingly urban, disconnected ways, we make many false assumptions about the rest of life, which given our own smallness, we can just call life. And the take-home, which I would love to talk more about, but we can come back to, is that life is more diverse, resilient, and in charge than we tend to imagine. That the rest of life has agency, and that it's important to recognize that just for animals, 7 out of every 8 animal species on Earth are not yet named, and 30,000 bacteria species are named. We estimate that there are 1 trillion bacteria species on Earth. And so our position, although we feel often powerful, is more humble than we imagined before the grandeur of the rest of the living world. Section 3, I'm going to dwell on a little bit longer, and this is the nature of mutual interdependence. And this question is, how do we broker our relationship with the rest of the life? Here I'm going to consider mutualisms, and here I'm going to go through some histories, keeping this beautiful termite in mind. And so that's a termite queen at top. Beneath her is a termite king. Her abdomen is full of eggs. And we tend to think about these termites, look at these termites as whole organisms. They are into and of themselves. They eat dead wood. What else is there to know? Well, the reality is that these termites are not into and of themselves, and that they can't live without the microbes that live in their guts. And for many termite species, the gut microbes and the termites are mutually unculturable. We don't know how to grow the termites in the lab without their microbes, and we don't know how to grow many of the microbes in the lab without their termites. And so for me, this is a metaphor for our own relationship with the rest of life. And the more you dig into this metaphor, the more hinky it gets. And so, for example, this is a protist that lives in the guts of some termites. It wiggles around to make its way, but what you see on the outside of the protus are not its cilia, but instead spirochetes. And so the protus moves around by having another organism that lives on its outside move on its behalf. And so inside the mutualism of the termite is another mutualism. And these can continue to be nested even more so. And so I think, this reality is a beautiful element of the natural world, but also something that we should keep in mind. And for the termites, a key part of this is that they have to find ways to inherit these microbes, much as the microbes have to inherit the termites. How do they do this? It's a little bit gross, but they do proctodial feeding. So one termite lines up behind the anus of another termite and ingests some of its microbes. Through that, they make sure that all individuals have the microbes that they need and can pass them on to next generations. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we think about our own mutualisms. And what I'm going to now do is kind of walk through a chronology of some of those mutualisms. And also begin to talk about scale a little bit. The first is microbial. I could talk for hours and hours about our own microbial mutualisms. Basically, every function of our body is imbued with microbes. Our microbes in our guts, microbes in our armpits, microbes all over our skin, microbes everywhere that are really us. And I like this art by Joanna Rousseau, and she shows herself as we think about her, and the self as we would think about her if we sniffed her, if we saw her microbes. And you can imagine this in the room right now. Can everybody humor me? I can't see you, so I just have to trust you. And raise your arms for 1 second. So any smell that's coming from your neighbor is not coming from your body cell, but from your microbial cells. And so it's in these very real ways, the microbes that are on us are reflecting us. You think of that smell of your neighbor as their smell, but it's really their partnership's smell. And so we've studied this a lot. We've looked at belly button microbes, we've looked at the evolution of humans and the evolution of the microbes. And it's a really essential part of who we are, and those relationships are definitely mutualisms. We've also realized recently, and they have that same feature of verticalness. You acquire most of these microbes from your mother during birth, and later, but less so, and then from foods and plants and soil exposures. My guess is that you as a group have very different microbes from many other people who are less connected to the dirt, less connected to your plants. And so as you think about your own body reflects those interactions that you have or fail to have. And one of the things we're seeing is that in Western humans, we're beginning to fail to acquire those microbes that we need through birth and through breastfeeding. And so our current condition is an unusual one. If you look at chimpanzees, this is the top panels. The x-axis shows geographic distance on the left here, and on the right it shows climate distance. And the y-axis shows how similar microbes of any two chimps are on the top panels. And so the key point is that when chimps are closer together, they have more similar microbes because they're acquiring them from their mom and from the food they eat. And that allows the chimp to match the microbes to their food, and to their pathogens, and to all their other challenges. In Western humans, there is now no relationship. On average, there's now no relationship between where you live and the microbes that you have. This is a fundamental disconnection. And it's created all sorts of problems we could talk about some other time. Inflammatory skin problems, ear infections, cavities, etc. Second mutualism, chronologically, for our ancestors, is our mutualism of trees. Our ancestors lived in trees in which they ate lots and lots of figs. In doing so, they dispersed the seeds of those figs, and then they, in essence, planted the forests in which they lived. They grew their own trees. Our ancestors planted forests behind them, wherever they went, and they lived in those forests. And the figs depended on them, and they depended on the figs. And we can dig into this. We have a project working on chimpanzees with the Pan-African Project across Africa. And we've seen that in the chimp feces, you see all the DNA of the figs, but you also see the DNA of other relationships. And so each fig species depends on fig wasps, and you see the fig wasps in the DNA in the feces of the chimps. reflecting the connectedness of these ancient relationships. And so, for millions of years, our ancestors moved with trees, and they planted trees, and then eventually we move into this pivot where we begin to plant and expand grasslands through agriculture. And we begin to change our partnership from trees to other kinds of plants. And this is a fundamental pivot. I'm giving it 10 seconds here. I would lovingly give this pivot 10 hours of talking. But an important thing to recognize is even as we made this pivot, we never stopped needing trees. But the scale of our needs shifted. We increasingly moved to needing trees, not just say that once upon a time our relationships with trees were very local. We ate their fruits, we dispersed their fruits locally, we lived in their branches. Now the biggest benefits of trees are global, and so we have an unusual mismatch of scales. There's very little ancient precedent for mutualisms in which the two partners are not intimately physically connected. And so now one of the key things that trees do is at the global scale to suck in our toxins, and that includes our greenhouse gases. And the economic value of this is enormous, but so too is the public health value, the human value. And at the same time that we're embracing these other values of trees that occur at these different scales, we continue to cut trees. And so there's this tension between what's good for us and what we do, which will be no surprise to the folks in the audience. I'm going to pivot now into what is chronologically, almost certainly, the next kind of mutualism in which our ancestors engaged, co-predation. And I think it's probably the case that the first mutualism involving co-predation related to this bird. It's a honey guide. It eats almost exclusively wax of bees, but it can't get into hives on its own. And so it involved the ability to partner with humans. And independently, in a dozen or more cultures across Africa, the honey guide would go to human villages and sing a specific song and call to people and fly a specific flight that the people learned meant, follow me and I will take you to a beehive. And the people learned in each culture to make a specific sound back to the honey guide to say, I'm following you. And so independently across Africa, this relationship emerges, and indigenous knowledge of this has long been deep. It took scientists longer to understand what was going on. And it's a very important relationship for humans gathering honey, and was long the most common way that humans found beehives in Africa. And so this is a mutualism between the honey guide and the humans. In many cases, it's at the expense of the bees. And so in that case, it's a co-predation. And in each case, as I said, the humans make a specific call with which they respond to the honey guide. The culture of the relationship is local in scale, even as the geography of the birds and humans is wider. Very similar relationships have emerged with dolphins, and we know of 4 or 5 of these examples. I'm almost certain that they used to be more common. The best studied is in Brazil. In Brazil, bottlenose dolphins, a particular group of a particular lineage of a particular subspecies of bottlenose dolphins, comes to a particular bay, and they do a kind of aquatic dance to tell fishermen to get ready. And the fishermen grab their net, part of the net in one hand, part in their mouth, and they wait for the dolphins. And the dolphins come in, and they school fish that are hard to catch with a hook and line toward the fishermen, and the fishermen throw the nets on the fish. And the dolphins snag some of the fish trying to escape the nets, the fishermen get the rest of the haul, and it's been documented that the dolphins benefit in terms of their fitness from this relationship, and the humans catch more fish than they would have otherwise, and it's very clear the dolphins are in charge. And this appears to have happened multiple places around the world. And these are relationships, again, with individual populations of individual subspecies of individual dolphin species and particular human families. Even more, from our modern moment, hard to believe and yet clearly true case is in the town of Eden in southeastern Australia, where hunters of the Tula mob would wait in the town of Eden for killer whales to come to the town of Eden to tell them they had trapped a baleen whale, and so, for example, a humpback whale. And so some of the killer whales would circle the humpback whale and pin it in place. One of the humpback whales would then go to the town to get the whalers, and the whalers would then come out and kill the humpback whale or other baleen whale, and they would leave the tongue for the killer whales, and then they would take the rest of the meat back. And again, it's documented that both the humans and the killer whales benefited from this relationship, and it was extraordinarily intimate. It was a family-scale relationship. And so Stephen Holmes, a Tua traditional custodian of stories, told Isabella Reeves in the paper recently, we consider Bewas, the killer whales, to be our brothers. Our Dreamtime stories, which connect us to the Bewas, is that when a Tua member dies, they are reincarnated as a Bewa. The Bewas remain part of the Tua even after passing. The Bewas would help the men by herding other whales in the Bay of Turamburlur for the whalers to kill. Aboriginals would give the Bewas the tongue of the dead whale. This was soon known as the law of the tongue. An extraordinary relationship, and it's been argued, and I've written about this too, that this maybe is the kind of relationship that was at the heart of the first human-wolf relationships, and eventually the domestication of dogs, and the place we find ourselves in today. I would invite you, as you think about these stories, to think about how familial they are, and also to think about, for so many of you, how the ways in which you relate to the species with which you work also have this feel of family and a relatedness that's deeper than the way we typically use that word. Mutualism 4, I'm going to try to go a little bit quickly here so we can have time for discussion, is between humans and grains, but also yeast. And I've worked a long time on sourdough bread, as Lori mentioned, but also beer and other contexts in which yeast are very important. If you go to a tropical forest and you watch a fruit fall in the forest and you watch it over time, there are kind of two things microbially that can happen with it. One is that it becomes filamentous, and what we might call moldy. And if that happens, it's most of the time not safe to eat. But the other thing that can happen is it can start to be covered with lactic acid bacteria, like you find in sauerkraut or kombucha, and acetic acid bacteria, like you find in vinegar. And both of those kinds of bacteria produce acids that kill pathogens. And so they make the rotting fruit safe. And then you also find yeast that produce alcohol. The alcohol also kills pathogens. And so if you find a fruit that is acidic and alcoholic, it is a safe fruit to eat. And I'm not advising you to go out to your local forest and use this as a rule of thumb, but it's not a bad starting point. And so the question is, when we think about our relationships with yeast or bacteria, when do we start to partner with them? When does that become the sort of next mutualism in our chronology? And for a long time, the discussion was that this happened, maybe it happened just after grains were domesticated, or maybe just before. And this was a ferocious debate. I think that the consensus is now moving to the idea that it happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. And one of the pieces of evidence that I find compelling is that there's now a case documented by Liz Mallett of capuchin monkeys, like this one, see the tonsure, that take these woody fruits that they cannot eat, and they take huge numbers of them and knock them out of the tops of trees and leave them on the ground. And then they come back 3 or 4 weeks later, and they eat them after they become kind of a fruity kombucha, and they become soft and acidic and a little bit alcoholic probably, and then they can ingest them. And so to me, this looks like controlled fermentation by capuchin monkeys. And so we can imagine this much earlier time for this human hand reaching out to fermentation, and the yeast also reaching out, not with their hands, they don't have them, but with their smells, with their alcohol, with their temptation. And we see genetic changes in our ancestors and in our own bodies that seem to reflect the possibility that this was very early. And so about 80 million years ago, apes evolved a version of alcohol dehydrogenase that supersized their ability to metabolize alcohol. And so they got more calories from ingesting alcohol than their ancestors would have. You all have this version of the gene. None of our ancestors that didn't have it survived. And roughly contemporaneous, recent studies shown that our ancestors also evolved lactate receptors in their tissues. And so these intercept the products of lactic acid bacteria, and they tell the immune system to calm down and tell the body to stop metabolizing fat. In essence, they say, body, when there's lactate, there's sugar, and when you encounter microbes that are making lactate, they're safe microbes. Calm down. And all of our ancestors that did not have that version failed to reproduce or died, and so we all have that version. The other thing that in our lab we've recently shown is that it looks about at the same time that our ancestors evolved a preference for sour taste. In mammals in general, the preference for sour taste is extraordinarily rare. And so to me and to others, these all look like evidence of early tangling with yeast. And what's interesting to me is that the yeast during this period did not change, but our bodies did. And when we talk about domestication, we usually say that the species that's the domesticate is the one that responds evolutionarily to the mutualism. And so pig growth, hormone behavior responded to human selection. But in the case of yeast and lactic acid bacteria, we changed more than they did. And so did they domesticate us? And this is, remember, something happening at vast temporal scales. Are we really a pawn in their theater? And so should we be telling the story of yeast and eventually grains as once upon a time a yeast began to domesticate humans, and then at some point the yeast wanted even more sugar, and so humans began to domesticate grains in order to feed the yeast. In some ways it's far-fetched, in other ways it's just as plausible as the story we usually tell. The fourth kind of transition in mutualisms I'm going to talk about is sort of a centaurian transition. And then I'm going to pull us back out in the next 5 minutes here. And to introduce this, I have to introduce the term symbiogenesis, which is the idea that when species come together to form a whole that's different from the sum of their parts, that this is an act of symbiogenesis, a new thing emerges. And so the termites and microbes that come together to form something that couldn't be on their own, that's a symbiogenesis. That first coming together is a symbiogenesis. With humans, we can have cultural symbiogeneses. When humans and other species come together to form a cultural whole that's more than its parts and has its own tendencies rather than rules. And we could talk about grain here, we could talk about pigs or cows or chickens. Chickens are especially weird. They're weird in part because we first domesticated chickens not for food, but because they seem to be able to tell the future. And then because we like to watch them fight, and only much later because we ate them and their eggs. Separate story. I'm going to focus though on horses. And with horses, I think there's a way in which horses are like yeast, a little bit in charge of the story, but also a little bit in charge of the consequences of our partnership. And Rebecca Solnit has a great line that there's a Buddhist story about a man galloping by a monk who asks, "Where are you going?" "Ask my horse," says the man. Which is to say, as we think about our partnerships with our other species, as you think about partnerships with the things you plant and the animals you tend, where are you going? Are you going where you want to go, or are you following them? Are they carrying you? In the context of horses, Peter Turchin and others have argued that the answer is that it's both. And that the horses in partnering with humans offer us a new predilection. Unfortunately, it was often a predilection to war and empire, that societies that partnered with horses were far more likely to go into expansive empire-building wars. Not deterministically, it didn't always happen, but that was the predilection. On the other hand, there appears to be a totally separate domestication of horses or partnership with horses in what is now Kazakhstan, where people partnered with horses and never rode them, but lived with them, ate with them, lived side by side. And so imagined a different relationship, went in contrast to that predilection. Interestingly, those people and the horses disappeared genetically, but they offer us still this story, this way of thinking that partnering with a specific species doesn't necessarily entail a particular future, even if there's a predilection. And so as we think about symbiogenetic tendencies, what if each species with which we partner predisposes humans to particular futures? Those futures aren't preordained, but more likely. If that's the case, how might we think about our own futures? For you as organic farmers, consider your cultural symbiogenesis. What does it entail? What beautiful future is your work pregnant with? What is the way of living that is entailed in each aspect of how you farm? And how do you tell other people about that? So take home 3. Now I'm pivoting toward the end here. I'll probably go till 9:17 if that's okay. Humans engage or have engaged in many types of mutualisms, most of which were geographically and linearly local, but some of which expand vast temporal domains. Now I'm going to close out by a reality check on a big picture of mutualisms today. Collectively, humans depend on tens of thousands of species, each of which is dependent on tens or more of other species. Just in Svalbard, there are 1.3 million seed varieties. Most of these have host-associated microbes. Many are dependent on other mutualists, such as pollinators. And so this web of connectedness is unlike anything else ever to have existed in nature. And I think this seedling with its mycorrhizae is emblematic of that dependence and connectedness. But so too are all those individual kinds of relationships we think about. And so when a termite founds a new colony, a termite queen needs to carry her microbes. I think we, as we imagine ourselves in the future, we need to recognize we have to carry everything, and also the species on which we might someday depend but don't yet depend. And so there's one part of our story. The other part, though, is that our collective dependency is different if we look at it from a biomass and mean standpoint. And this is something I consider some in this book never have seasoned. I've learned things since this book, I think a little bit differently, but similarly. A small number of plant species represent the vast majority of the calories we intake. And I don't have how these plants are grown, but as you know better than me, a large proportion of these plants are grown in industrial approaches at industrial scales, in pesticide and fertilizer dependent ways. The other reality is if we look at mammal biomass, the top figure shows the relative weights of different kinds of mammals. And so that red at the top is humans, cattle is that, what color would we call that? I guess this other red. All that bottom red is domesticated animals. And so that is the dominant mutualism of humans and mammals. And yet we still depend on wild mammals. But they're the teeny green on the one side and the teeny blue on the other side in terms of living mass. And so all of that wild mammal we depend on is now in a smaller and smaller part of the world. And then there are other weird things that I don't think we talk about enough. Right now the biomass of dogs is equal to that of all wild mammals on Earth. And I've written it 3 times because to me it's so unusual that it needs to be repeated. Is this what we want? How do we think about this? Right now, cats, if we study their stable isotopes, are acting like hyperpredators. They're trophically like hyenas. And a lot of their protein comes from predators from the ocean. How do we think about that? That's a weird part of our world. And so we, on the one hand, have this extraordinary dependence, on the other hand, have reshaped Earth in a way that very few species dominate. And so there are options, but the planet is small and the pieces are few. Take home 4, we collectively depend on many species, and yet a handful of species account for the vast majority of human calories. Now what? And this is going to pivot us into discussion. Big picture, we have about 1 trillion species of bacteria, 30,000 named, the unknown is great. As we think about the future, how do we think about what we grow, what we eat? Should we have more microbes? And how do we do this while recognizing that most of the time no one person decides, that there are these decisions being made separately all over the earth by farmers, by those engaged in the farm bill, in all these different places. And what metrics, to come back to the beginning of the talk, do we use to think about these relationships? And maybe I'll just end at the next slide out a little bit more. But this is Christina Koch. She was in the International Space Station. I had the pleasure to interview her. And we were talking about her life on the International Space Station, and she said, well, you know, on the space station, we all fight for the job of watering the plants. Because when we smell the plants, it reminds us of Earth, and it makes us feel okay. What metric is that of our relationship with the rest of life? It's one that's familiar to you. What else do we choose? Is it fitness? Not anymore. Is it life expectancy? Is it disability-adjusted life years? Is it human development index? Is it sustainability? Which of these are symmetrical? Do we ask the same things of our partners that we ask of ourselves? How do we think about our relationships? And you know more about this than almost anyone on Earth. And so how do we listen to you well enough that your voices are loud in these discussions? And here I think of this line from Jim Harrison, who was writing about a time when entomologists thought that there were 30 million species of arthropods. It still could be true. Where he said, sitting on a stump, I feel a little closer to the idea that I'm a member of just one of possibly 30 million species. How do we also build into the questions we ask the humility of that recognition? And so I'm going to close there. I'll offer 3 quick surprising things. Just one is that we look back through time, our partnerships changed historically during times of climate change. And so how do we think about the climate change that's coming and a recognition that our partnerships will again change? Second is we can tell you for your farms what place are they going to become like in the future, so you can think with those farmers. And so if you live in Tampa, your farm is going to become climate-wise like parts of Mexico in the future. How do you get the conversations going with those farmers? Third, there are places on Earth, and they're hashed in black here, that are going to have climate so extreme that our ways of farming today are insufficient. How do we imagine new ways to live in those places that are bold enough given that challenge? And then finally, and this always throws me, but I think it's good to think with, we're going to need to feed more people in the next decades, but all scenarios for human population size globally suggest massive declines in human population because of reduced birth rate. There aren't other scenarios right now. If that's true, how do we also think far enough into the future that we're thinking not just about this hard year, this year, or the next 3 hard years, but we're also imagining this time with smaller human populations and wilder places and the agriculture we want? How do we keep that in mind? Because if you live on a 100-year farm, 100 years from now is a fundamentally different time. And so I'll stop there. Hopefully you feel there.
All right, we're getting our panelists up here. Oh, I don't have, yeah. All right, Rob, so our panelists are coming up to the front. So if it is possible, I know, I'm going to just pass the mic. So each of them can introduce themselves real quickly, and then we'll kind of like start to mull over some of these questions with Rob.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Glenn Philbrick, Hiddendale Farm, North Dakota. I'm also faculty at Sitting Bull College at Standing Rock.
Is that all you want?
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Jokala. I work for an organization called the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, where I am a pollinator conservation specialist and partner with the NRCS. I also farm in southeastern Minnesota, where we grow a variety of things, and maybe we'll say more about that later. But
Poso maune wiok, nakato manowich kikitim, kispiso makake nitnakayan, mashik nawiswan, Marcus Greeno. Hello everyone. My people know me as Kispiso Makake or Swift Otter, and was named Marcus Greeno by my parents. I'm from the Menominee Indian Reservation, and I work as an agricultural researcher. Specifically, I work on industrial hemp varieties that we're looking to adapt to the Great Lakes region as to be acclimated. And then in another role, I serve as the policy and strategy specialist for the Rural Coalition. They're based out in DC, worked on 9 farm bills. This will be my 3rd farm bill I'll be working on. And then in another hat, I work as a intertribal food business development coordinator for the Menominee Indian Tribe, Wisconsin. So elder food boxes, all that stuff. Folks that are part of that group, I'm basically like your technical assistance person going forward. So looking forward to this conversation, and it's great to see a packed room today. So
Hey,
thank you.
Test.
So again, I apologize for technical
Test.
difficulties, but I am just, I would love for each of you from your own perspectives. I love that we've got farmers with just like other deep experience in addition to farming. Kind of like what really struck you in Rob's message today, and then maybe we can start a little bit of a dialogue with him in the time that we have.
So in my old age, which I'm not going to say how old I am because my students don't need to know that, something I cherish is my relationship with my cattle, especially my dairy cattle. And I realize more the mutualism we have with each other, and how we need to sit back and look and try and communicate with them and try to understand them. And I realize there's sometimes cows love you for no reason, and there's others that hate you for no reason, just like people, you know. But there's also the positive relationships. And it's like, well, death is reality. And something I never forget is when I had a cow that I knew she was going to go, and it was cold, so I had them all together. And there's a cow that she just didn't like people. Okay. Okay. She wasn't easy to work with, but when the cow named Diane passed on, then she gave me a look she'd never given me before. It's like that was a special moment, and I realized, okay, I don't know why she wasn't fond of people, but we have some mutual connections in that way. And for Rob's comments concerning biology and microbes, this is new for me, but it's like I think we need to take a microscope out in the garden or in the field and look at these things a little closer. It's important.
yeah, forgive me. I'm feeling really humbled about how am I supposed to respond or say anything intelligent after the talk and how it relates to how we farm. As a conservationist and somebody who has a platform to tell people that insects are the little things that run the world, I've been really humbled, and my mind has been blown reading some of Rob Dunn's work in the last few months and realizing, oh, it's actually the microbes that run the world, and insects are just the things that we can see. Where am I going with that? I don't know. This is a lot. It's so important. I mean, who's in charge? Those are the things that make, that was a kind of a trigger for me. One of the things I love about being a biologist is that just I daily get encountered by humility about everything else that's out there that we get to share this planet with, and that if we could just realize we aren't really in charge, that we will pass and they will survive, and we might as well cherish what we have here that we can see and maybe even thrive alongside these things. I've been thinking a lot about Rob's work, not just in the talk today, but also thinking about the work we do at Xerces, trying to have an impact on pesticide reform, thinking about how pesticides are ubiquitous and widespread. And it's a little bit like antibiotics, where we're taking antibiotics to kill the one thing that's troubling, but in the sweep of it, we're probably killing everything else. And I think that's what's happening a lot with the pesticides that are ubiquitous in our environment, and thinking about not that it's just killing the insects that we depend upon, but also their microbiomes, fundamentally changing their health. I'm underslept and totally overwhelmed by the biological kind of intricacies that we get to farm in. And I will just hand it off now.
I think after listening to Rob and kind of hearing, his talk and everything, I think a lot about this experience I had with my brother on our family land on the reservation. And one year we started kind of reclaiming our food security, and so we created this greenhouse. Well, in that time of us building the greenhouse, getting the garden together, having everything going, this snake showed up, this pine snake, and started living in the greenhouse. And our aunt and uncle that lived on the land started telling us a story about our grandfather who had this garden, and everybody on the reservation knew the garden on Rabbit Ridge because it was huge, full of all kinds of different plants, produce, medicines. And there was a snake that would come through, and it would eat all the rodents and everything that would be coming through to try and take the produce. And I remember my aunt and uncle were saying this story that my dad wanted to kill the snake, and my grandfather was like, no, he helps me. He helps me make sure that this garden's taken care of. So like the mutualism of that is like that symbiotic relationship between the snake and my grandfather passed on to my brother, who was kind of really taking care of it. And then kind of jump forward to when I started doing agricultural research. I'm a proud recipient of a SARE grant. So when I was doing my work in SARE, I was watching all the different insects interact with the hemp. And it was at least like, we grew hemp in 2015, it got taken from us, and then we weren't able to grow again until 2019, 2020. But watching like the ground bees coming up in the fall and taking all the sugars off of the plant and bringing them back into the ground, or watching the honeybees, 30, 50 of them on a male hemp plant, grabbing all the pollen they could and taking it away. But the most intriguing thing was the yellow jackets that were embedding themselves into these flowers, cannabis flowers, and they were just pulling everything out of there and taking it away. And for me, I was just like, wow, granted, I'm doing all this research, I'm creating this seed, but yet I'm also creating an environment of mutualism with all these different insects that were kind of taking a lot of the things from the hemp plant. And what's interesting is that, hemp has been off Wisconsin land from like 1957 up until, 2017, 2018. So there was years of just no opportunities to have that ability of that nature interacting with the plant. And just watching it in the last 10 years that I've kind of watched hemp plant grow in this environment, it's very moving, and seeing mutualism happen just before my eyes is, I think, is the biggest reward for me as a agricultural researcher and as a beginning farmer. So.
Now, Rob, I'm seeing you kind of interacting and thumbs upping here as we go. Did you have anything you wanted to add to kind of their stories?
My one reaction is I talk too much, and so I mostly just want to listen, but I have a couple of quick reactions, if it's okay. One is the story about the cows really strikes me, and as I look across history and places about relationships with mammals, that individualized relationship with an individual animal has culturally for so long in so many places been so important. and that the death of that animal is part of that relationship, and that there's that there's an honoring in that death is something I feel the deep loss of when we talk about the partnerships with the animals that we eat. That really struck me. The other part that struck me is thinking about the beautiful work that Xerxes does, and thinking about insects, is that if I think about the travels I've been lucky enough to have around the world, that in many places people who live on the land, and especially indigenous people living in traditional places, have deep knowledge of insects in those places, and very little of it is apparent, and much of it has been lost. I worked in the Bolivian Amazon during my PhD, and any 12-year-old kid could tell you 20 species of ants. Most entomologists could not. And so there was this deep knowledge of specific species and how they related to culture and place and what they indicated, that I think farmers build up. And the idea, the hemp story for me is so beautiful because it's restoring that relationship. It's reconnecting two species that used to be connecting, but it's also reconnecting with knowing that story and seeing it and beginning to observe it. And that struck me. The idea of the microscope in the field struck me in the sense that I think it's already there in some ways. When you smell the dirt, I can't see a show of hands, but how many of you taste your soil? At least historically, that's really common. When you smell your plants, when you smell the animals, when you smell whether or not they're sick, in all of those cases, you're smelling the microbes. And so I think we feel as though we need to know their names and we need to be able to see them to relate to them. But I think in truth, we've been relating to them for all this time. And it really struck me when we did the bread projects that Lori mentioned, that we asked people around the world to send their sourdoughs, and we would figure out which species were in there and how to learn from what people had already learned. And we had a little box on our survey forms that said, is there something else you want to tell us about your sourdough? And it was an afterthought. And people wrote 70,000 words of something else they wanted to tell us, because they wanted to tell us about the smell, the taste, but also the ways in which, just like that cow, the sourdough was part of the family, connected to the family. It reminded, someone of a grandma, of a grandpa, of somebody who's no longer around but is still connected to that bread and the act of making the bread. And so that missing knowledge that we don't always pay attention to, those smells, but also those stories, I think are so important. And then I love that, that snake story, "No, he helps me," is such a great sentiment. And it also made me think that one of the things I'm aware of and don't know how to write about is that, in many places there's also an appreciation for the species that don't help us in that traditional way, but are part of our relationships. And so the Japanese poet Kobayashi Issa wrote often about the species around him in his daily life. And often there were species that didn't help him, but that still mattered to him. And so he wrote, "Oh flea, whatever you do, don't jump, that way is the river." And so this kindness for the flea, or the bed bugs scatter as I clean, parents and children, the recognition of the relationship. Or one of my own favorites, "Don't worry, spiders, I keep house casually." And so the idea for me there that those still read as interesting and meaningful across 500 years in wildly different cultures, but that we continue to negotiate how we think about these relationships and the ways in which other beings have families are also living out their ways, struck me in the comments.
Yeah, all right, thanks so much for kind of sharing that. And I think for me, kind of one takeaway is that we're all better off when we keep house casually. I'm going to take that one with me. And then I think the other that is really was really moving is this like idea of who are we together collectively and making meaning together, which I hope as we move forward together today that some of this has inspired us to share our stories and share the mutualism and find those within each other. And so I'm just going to give huge appreciation here for Dr. Dunn and his patience and all of your patience as we struggled with the internet. And thank you so much for our panelists. Come and find them. They're doing sessions. They're around and about so that we can interact with them a little bit more. And I will go ahead and turn it back to Claire for our farmer recognition. So thank you all.
I wish I could be there in person, but thank you so much. I'm grateful for the food you make and the ways you relate to the rest of the living world, and I'm grateful for your community.
Lots to think about. One of the duties of the board is to select the Organic Farmers of the Year. This award recognizes Midwestern farmers for outstanding land management, innovative farming practices, and the outreach they do to teach others how organic farming works. This year, we would like to congratulate Jackie and Harry Hoke of Hoke Orchard and Gardens, who are named Marbleseed's 2025 Organic Farmers of the Year. Hoke Orchard and Gardens is a certified organic, vertically integrated operation that sells only fruit and products proudly grown and made on the farm. They are in the process of retiring to Belize to have a whole new adventure in perennial polyculture. And I'm personally delighted to welcome them to the stage with their successor farmers who are going to take over their farm here in Minnesota. They have been a long influence on me and my own farm for several decades. And so if you all would like to come up, you get to tell your story. And we have small gifts for our recognized entities this year. Little flower pot and a little cash award and a bookstore certificate, which so congratulations again, and thank you for all of your contributions to our movement.
Well, it probably would be best just to hand the microphone to Jackie, because as soon as I start talking, she'll take the microphone from me. So we'll just start.
That's not true. So I was in California this past fall after we've gone through a few years of this idea of transitioning our farm or moving on or doing something different and moving from this beautiful place, and I get a call from Kathleen Dillette from Iowa saying, would you guys be the Farmers of the Year? And I'm like, but we're not farming. And then I talked to Harry, and he said, yeah, we are. So he can talk a little more.
Yeah, that was a little frustrating and interesting. We've been working on finding somebody to take over the farm for many years, and I'd say 3 years ago, we started working with Renewing the Countryside and the American Farmland Trust. And we've had multiple field days and presentations, and we've had multiple people show interest. But after 3 years, we didn't have a buyer. And then finally, last fall, we got somebody interested. They were ready to, they were from the Twin Cities area. They were coming down and meeting with us, figuring out the transition, and then they looked over their financials and decided at the last minute, no, the sale isn't going to go through. And this was this fall, October. We're supposed to close on the farm with the trust, and I was frustrated. I told Jackie, well, after 3 years of doing this, that's it. We're just going to put the farm up to the realtor, and I'm done. I'm selling out. I'm selling out both physically and figuratively. And then Jackie calls and says, they want to give us the Organic Farmer of the Year award. I said, no way. But Jackie makes the decisions. So we are extremely appreciative of this award. And it's been a long battle, a long life, a long time of farming. And let's see, we've got, another 40 minutes or so? So it started back in 1983.
Can you just ask us to advance it? We'll advance it for you if you just tell us, say advance a slide.
Anyway, my father passed away when I was in my first year of college in 1983, and I've been running the farm since. And in December of 2024, we sold the farm. So 41 years of managing the same farm is probably enough. So now we're moving on to Belize. We bought a lot on an eco-development, and we are installing a permaculture food system for food security at this development. So that's our next project. What's happening at Hoke Orchard? Well, we sold the farm to the American Farmland Trust, and now the trust is leasing the farm to a little farm you guys probably haven't heard of, Featherstone Farm. So Featherstone is going to be adding apples to their system and distributing our cider and fruit. So I thought maybe each of these characters up here that are going to be taking over could maybe say a couple of words. Maybe in Ian's case, Ian worked on our farm for several years and now works for Featherstone and will be taking over for us. Maybe you can share a memory and what's going on in the future and what you're all looking forward to.
Well, you're putting me on the spot here, Harry. Yeah, my name's Ian Bottorff. Like Harry said, I worked for the Hoax for 4 years before I've been working at Featherstone for the last 6 years, I believe. And yeah, I'm honored to continue the legacy, and I'll be managing the orchard next year and hopefully for many more years to come. Yeah, geez, I have great memories working for Harry and Jackie, and it's hard to think of one specifically on the spot, but yeah, I made hard cider there, and that was great fun. And among other things, yeah, it's great to work for. And yeah, I don't have a specific memory, but pass it on to Nathan here.
Hey guys, I'm Nathan. Yeah, I work at Featherstone. We're going to do our best to continue their legacy on this land. Yeah, we don't really have much to add other than just like we're extremely grateful for this, for whatever this is going to be, for this opportunity. They have left a really awesome resource there. I've just started to get to know this place over the last 12 months, but it's been a bright spot in my life to be able to go over there and just see what they've built. It's really, really awesome and really unique, something that I don't think there's a lot of these places left. So we're proud to continue it, and yeah, just extremely grateful. I don't think Tanya wants to say anything.
So I'm not quite sure how much time we have because I know that there's another presentation to go. So I just again want to say I appreciate very much the life that I've lived. I often tell people that I choose to farm because it's the life I want to live. And I also am very grateful that the land that we lived on, and will continue to live on, is going to be stewarded. I always said that naming Hoke Orchard didn't seem like the right name to me because it had our name associated with it. And it was there before us, and it will be there long after us, so we're very grateful to have people taking care of this land. And even though we will be in Belize most of the year, we will maintain one of the houses on the farm, and we'll be able to be back and see the growth and the development on the farm.
So how much time do we have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I guess I'd like to recognize two of our big supporters, our daughters, Angie and Missy. If you guys could stand up and... And my son-in-law, Danny. So how about for the last minute, they can put the slideshow back on, and Jackie can name off some of the interns and different.
So when I put the slides together, they said, can you put together a picture of some things that happened on the farm? And the first thing that came to my head was all of the people that have been part of our farm, either working there or in partnerships and so forth. And it was hard to say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to even talk about it? So the first slide here is Harry and his mom and one of the pigs that our daughter Missy nursed back to life, Henri. Okay. And this is Angie and Missy when we first were moved back to the farm after being up in the cities. Just a beautiful picture of our daughters when they were young. And then there's our daughters with Harry in Belize on one of our trips to explore our new place to live. This is Dan Von Arx, and he retired from the railroad and hadn't even received his first retirement check, and he came to work for us, and he fixes everything and anything. So here's he and I celebrating with a shot of tequila last fall. This is Grandpa Jack, and then even though you can't see him, this is two of our international interns. It's Rode and Sayo. One of the things that is interesting about my life now that I live in Belize, people will say, oh, you guys must have traveled all over. Well, we never traveled anywhere. We traveled vicariously by bringing international students from all over the world to our farm. So every continent, there are people that say, come and visit, come and visit. So we learned their cultures, we brought them to the farm, and we enjoyed having them on the farm. But Grandpa Jack was a great addition. That's Ian in hard cider, so he's pressing out some juice. And like Ian said, he was on the farm for 4 years before he went to Featherstone.
You could see his level of enthusiasm there.
He looked really excited. One of the things that we did every fall is we helped sponsor a race in La Crescent. La Crescent's the apple capital of Minnesota, and every year we made people run. It was just a 5K, and this is one of the groups from one year that ran with us, and I think this was the year where they said the last person to cross the line had to do dishes for a week, because we ate communally and lived communally, and so everybody had a dish day, and this was a tough race because no one wanted dishes for a week. I don't remember. This family is near and dear to our heart. This is Bruno and his wife and their daughter and his brother, and they have been coming back to our farm for 9 years? 7 years. And they are wonderful. They were the work that they could do and the way that they integrated with our family. We miss them dearly, and they are wonderful people, and we were so happy to have them be part of our farm, and happy to be able to work to bring Daniela, Bruno's daughter, up the year after she was born, so he was able to be on our farm, working on our farm, but still have his family with us, so we're happy about that. This is Yolanda, and this was some pictures about the farmer's market. The table looks like it's about to sink from all of the stuff that's there, but it's got apples and vinegars and apple sauces and syrups, and one of the things that the international students really liked was going to the farmer's market. We also would do a wing night, so if we had a particularly rough day, we'd go into the local bar and have wings and beer, and so this was a couple people. Ivan from Moldova was another key person on our farm. He came back 3 years in a row, and to see his smiling face and to see Showtime in the back, just all the memories of all the people that were on the farm. This is Nick, and he worked with us for 3 years, and he helped manage the animals, and he's giving Henri a little bit of a drink right there, taking care of the animals, and it reminded me of the story when they were talking about the some animals like you and some animals don't like you, and Nick would always have animals that really liked him, and every once in a while he'd have one that just would not behave. So that makes me think of a good story about Tag. So after a while, you can, if you see me around, you can ask me the Tag story. This is Steve. He worked with us for a couple of years, and he helped us with hard cider, and he's just out there in the plum blossoms smiling with his thumbs up. He was an integral part of beginning the hard cider project that we had. This is Lars at the farmer's market. This is Katie and Andrew. And Katie worked with us as we were getting close to being done with the farm, but she had all sorts of ideas and projects, so she worked on the bees after Grandpa Jack passed away, and she made sauerkraut, and she did farmers markets, and okay, good. And along with the people, one of the things that it will always be in my heart is the animals. And here's Harry and Merle taking care of baby lambs in the spring. And dogs. You know, they talked about how many dogs are on the earth. Well, there's been lots of dogs at the orchard. So that's me and 4 dogs on a four-wheeler taking a ride. So that's an important part of the farm were the dogs that we have. And then the fruit. So this is some La Crescent plums that we took to the farmer's market. And apples, when one of the interns that we had, Nathan, said to me, "Oh my God, there's enough food on this farm that it could kill somebody." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, just the heft of it alone." So just for people who haven't seen apples be harvested or seeing a full cooler or seeing the weight of this, it's pretty amazing to see all of that fruit come in. And then just the bags that we have, these bags are marked biodynamic, and we, for a period of time, were certified biodynamic as well. So all of the synergies and talking about the mutualisms and microorganisms and things and how our farm functions. For me, that interconnection is what makes the farm work. And when you talked about microscopes in the field, one of the rooms in our house has 2 microscopes. So this is all really important stuff. So I think we're getting close. Apricots, purple raspberries, berries, hairy grafting. We did a lot of grafting of our own trees. As we planned to move away, we said, what's the legacy we want to leave? And we had some hogs and sheep, and we actually worked with some groups to find small farmers that were interested in continuing that on. So we did a hog giveaway, and then we did, along with that, a sheep giveaway. So we gave away our flocks to farmers that could potentially continue that on. And then alcohol, working with the La Crosse Distillery, and hard cider with Pearl Street Brewery. Jen, I couldn't find a picture of Jen and Dan, but for years they did sales on the farm, and she would make these hand pies that were wonderful, and people would come back and say, "Hey, can I get some of those hand pies?" So, and more animals. This is my little dog, Hansel, making sure that the baby pigs are doing just fine. He had to get right in there every time, so he was the midwife. Or he was also the enforcer in that when the boar decided to get out and go into the pond, he had to stand on the boar's back and tell us to get back out of there. So, And this is just a shot in the orchard of some dwarf trees. And then our new beginnings in Belize. And that's our house in Belize surrounded by trees, banana trees, and a dog in the corner. Again, one of those dogs that are populating the earth. And then last Saturday, we had a tour in Belize of the farm that we're starting to set up. And Pro Organic Belize gave us a certificate. So we're a certified organic permaculture farm in Belize now. So that's the story. Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. One more round for the Hausch family. So I'm going to go through recognizing now our Changemaker of the Year. So if you have the time right now to join me in recognizing this year's awardee. The Changemaker, for those of you that haven't had the chance or hear about it or is your first time here, is about celebrating emerging leadership in organic farming and food movement who creatively overcome systemic challenges in order to nurture a thriving and agricultural future for all. So with that said, for the 2025 conference, Changemakers of the Year, we are pleased to award families anchored in total harmony, Faith. They're based in Gary, Indiana. Faith is an organization dedicated to uplifting communities through initiatives in food justice, social justice, environmental sustainability, economic development, and health equity. A little bit about my relationship with Faith CDC. I got to meet them last year, and I have been personally inspired about what they have brought to life in their community. More than anything, and within topic of what we heard earlier and from the keynote, they have been really focused on centering and honoring the role and power that growing food, building sovereignty, and fomenting agroecology has in reinvigorating both urban and rural communities. Without further ado, please join me in honoring Faith with this recognition.
Thank you, Ileana, to Lori and Claire, and to the board of directors and everyone that had anything to do with us receiving this. We want to say thank you, so give them a hand. My name is Curtis Whitaker. I have with me Frida Graves, who works with us, and we have with us, oh my God, Chef Lucero, who is with us, Donato, and as Ileana mentioned, we're from Gary, Indiana. We're Faith CDC. I am cognizant that you all have been sitting for a long time and that we have something to do after this, so we will try to keep it, say it with a kiss. We started Faith CDC as an outreach ministry of our church. I pastor the church, Progressive Community Church in Gary, Indiana, in the middle of a blighted and economically stressed community. So imagine, if you will, in a city that our church sits on with one occupied house on the block, and our church and the rest of the block is blighted. That's our context. And then the next street over is blighted. One resident who lives in a block that has lots of houses, but they're all vacant and abandoned. 13 years ago, I became pastor of our church, and God gave us a vision for growing food. So 13 years ago, I knew nothing about growing food. The only thing I knew about food is that I love to eat it, right? And so But God shared with us some things, that there would be a famine in the land. We need to know where our food comes from, and that's how we started. We started really small with 3 raised beds, grew a lot of food, and we said, let's continue to grow from there. And from that point on, we began to think about, we thought about what happens when a child goes to bed hungry, not knowing where their next meal will come from. We began to think about, how do we respond when entire neighborhoods like Gary lack access to fresh and nutritious food. Began to think about, what does it say about our society when people have to choose between paying rent or purchasing and buying groceries. Dr. King spoke about the fierce urgency of now. And it was a reminder that justice delayed is justice denied. And he warned against waiting for a more convenient time to do what was right. And that helped us as we continued to move forward and get started. We're a church, so we believe in what Jesus said, when you were hungry, when I was hungry, you fed me. And hunger is not just a physical issue for us, it's a moral and a spiritual crisis. And when people are deprived of food, they are deprived of dignity. And we see it every day in our community. They're deprived of health. So in Gary, we have, in Lake County, we have 26, the county that Gary is in, food deserts. 14 of those are in the city that we do our work in. In Gary, we have high numbers of heart disease and diabetes and other chronic diseases and illnesses that we've learned to tackle with food. And so we are moving in Gary to do something about what we see happening around us. And so we started, again, with 3 raised beds, and we've just grown over the years with the farm. We now, thanks to NCRS and others, have 4 wind tunnels that we grow a lot of food in. We have goats, ducks, and chickens now in the middle of an urban community. We have a container farm of which we grow food in. And then Frida's a nurse, and I'll turn the mic over to her and then to Chef. And she began to talk to me about year 3 or 4 or 5 about the correlation between food and medicine. And so we then began a food as medicine program, and she runs it, so I'll let her share about it.
Good morning. Thank you, Pastor Curtis, and thank you all for the recognition. When I came on to the farm, when Pastor Curtis asked me to come on to the farm, approximately 6 or 7 years ago, I said, you want me to be farm administrator? I run from bees. I run from bugs. I don't garden. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about growing. I'm nervous. I'm shaking. I don't even know how to use a hoe to pick up. I was picking the weeds up with my hand. But I didn't know. The hoe was sitting in the corner. Somebody had to show me how to use the hoe. So when I got out there, and day one, I'm in love. I'm in love. It was already food growing. Now I'm in love. This is peace. This is peace. This is how we help our community. I just got hooked. Forget my nursing career. Bye. I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer by choice and a nurse by profession at that time. But now I've given up on the nursing career because I can't stop going and growing. And when I got out there, I'm looking at the food, and then as Pastor Curtis said, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Let me start exploring because, come from a nursing background. We're used to giving meds to everybody. But then when I'm looking at the oregano, and I know I'm starting to recognize oregano is for the respiratory system, and it's an antifungal, and the thyme is an antifungal, and I started just exploring it. And then as we continued on, we had interns out there, and we started talking to we got a CSA. We started talking to our CSA customers. If we were to give you these produce, these different kind of produce, and these things in these boxes and things like that, and do some nutrition education, would you eat it? And a lot of them said no because we don't know how to cook it. Because culturally, we're a little bit different. In our culture, it's different. We're a lot of collard greens and things like that. In the Southern cooking as well. Southern cooking as well. Slow down. He had it upside down, but I can read. I can do this. Slow down. Yes, I'm sorry about the translation. I'm a fast talker. I will try my best to slow down. We heard a lot of Southern cooking, but what they were cooking it with was, to me, with the different kind of ingredients, was making it worse for our cardiovascular system, our diabetics, and things like that. We were losing people way too early. We were losing just at an abnormal rate. But as we started, we just dwelled deeper into it, and we spoke to people and asked them, if we show you how to cook it in a different way, would you eat it? So that's how we got on the food as medicine concept. We continue to. And then at the same time, we're addressing food insecurity. So we had a few grants that we were able to have. One was medically tailored meals, and that's for cardiovascular disease only. And we worked with a chef. It's a different chef we're working with. But we did culturally relevant, heart-healthy meals. And that's, you just went past it. But if you go back, that graph you see up there shows the results. We worked with a local Indiana university. And we spoke with, we did what was called a plate analysis every week for our participants to be able to say how this was helping them. And we let them do self-monitoring as far as their labs and all those kind of things like that, because we didn't want to step over the HIPAA rules. But they came back with these stories, amazing stories of their doctors asking them, what are you doing differently? Your lab values are down. Your blood pressure is better. All these kind of things. That's what touched my heart more so than anything in this program. It's just hearing the stories of the participants that are getting better. I always go back to one gentleman that came in, and he was just feeling bad. He was walking slow, and he was feeling down. And after 3 months of this program, he had a pep in his step. And he came and talked to us. He said, I have a pep in my step now. I feel better. I can walk up the stairs. So that's what food as medicine is to us, just helping our people reverse the health disparities. We do a prescription produce box every other week, all organic produce, and then the medically tailored meals. And each of them stay on there for 6 months. And the last thing that struck me about these programs is being able to help with their financial needs. If you look at the meals, they're $10 a meal. We do 7 meals a week. That's $70 a week, $280 a month, and I had the accountant help me with this, $1,680 in 6 months that they're saving. People are able to pay their bills, get more food in their homes, and just be able to change some of the health disparities. We know we're just starting a small footprint because this is 100 to 200 people, but we know this is a mission from God, and we're going to continue to move in our community, continue to help our community. And it's not just Gary, Indiana, it's the whole Northwest Indiana community that we're looking at. So I'm just so grateful for this recognition. I'm just so grateful that we can be here, and I'm just so grateful that we can have food as medicine in our lives. Oh, and being a farmer freedom.
Thank you again for the recognition. It's a big honor, and it's a big honor that 4 years ago, I was born in Gary, but I wasn't raised in Gary, and 4 years ago, my husband and I moved to Gary, and I didn't know what I was going to do as a chef, especially coming from Chicago. I thought, I don't think I'm ever going to work as a chef again, is what I thought, because it's a different demographic, even though we're super close. And then I met Frida, and I started to visit the farm, and when Frida was doing her CSA boxes, she asked, can you do something with these vegetables? And do a sample so they can learn how to make some stuff with these samples. And I did, and it was great, and the kids loved it, and that's where our idea of collaborating and working together, our mutualism grew. And I love that word, by the way. And that's how we started to collaborate with some of the dishes and some ideas to come up with for the kids to learn how to eat different foods that they probably wouldn't have thought of cooking or making on their own, or their parents make. And then from there grew the idea of a fresh frozen kitchen, and that is what I'm working on. That's as a fresh frozen kitchen, and as a chef, it opened so many opportunities to do so many amazing things. But one of the things that I've always loved is color. I loved the color of food. I want to make sure that the food, even when I cook, doesn't lose its color. So obviously, don't overcook your vegetables. And so part of what I do is in the fresh frozen kitchen is train people that some staff people that are on our farm, and then they come over to the kitchen and they've learned how to break down vegetables and freeze them. So the process in and of itself, it sounds super easy, but because I love color, I have to make determination on and train our staff on the vegetables that we will be blanching, because when you flash freeze a vegetable, it turns a different color. It's not beautiful and vibrant all the time. So part of the process of the R&D that we did in the last year was which vegetables we were going to blanch so that when we freeze it, it's still beautiful and people want to eat it. And so this is a picture of some of the vegetables that we've did R&D on as far as presentation. But then one of the things as a chef is I wanted to make sure that when somebody opens that package, they're still eating something that's pretty amazing, even though the freshness as far as it coming from the farm and eating it is still there, and it's beautiful, it's delicious. So that was one of the things that we learned, that we started to do at the Fresh Frozen Kitchen. But I think in and of itself, the beauty of it also now is what we're transforming. So now we have year-round fresh vegetables. And when we break down the vegetables, we're not throwing away the waste. We're actually taking it back to the farm for the animals to eat. So we're not wasting, instead of compost, this is actually food that the animals get to eat as well. So it's a circle of life happening at the farm, which is pretty amazing. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I thank you all. And I'm kicking it back to Pastor Curtis.
I'm going to hand it back to Pastor Curtis, but I just want to mention our new ag, and that's next urban ag generation. And we have 6th through 12th graders out there every year, and we go through 7 weeks of curriculum that we wrote from an urban perspective about farming and how to farm and how to grow, and food is medicine. And they go to that class for 7 weeks every Saturday, and then they come out to the farm for 6 weeks, and we pay them $15 an hour to be out there to learn to farm. And we don't just farm, we take them through entrepreneurship classes, we take them through fiscal responsibility, we take them through medicine. We've had doctors come and speak with them, people about documentary filmmaking. So we want to be able to let our youth know that there are careers in farming. There's a way to continue to move through agriculture. And in the city, we're not really used to that because we're the biggest one in the city. And when I say people look at those goats and chickens and ducks, and we get visitors every day. But I'm so glad we're able to bring this into our city, that people are able to see that. And I'm handing the mic over to Pastor Curtis. I am done.
Thank you all. For us, it's the fierce urgency of now, as Dr. King suggests, and it calls us to move from words to actions. We can't wait on government policies to change. We have to move because we know that it is the right thing to do. And that's what we've done. That's why we started. We understand that Batman's not going to show up, nor is Superman, nor Wonder Woman. But we are them. We're the ones that can change our communities. You are them. You're the ones doing the work that help change our neighborhoods and our community. Thank you.